The silence in the war room was complete, except for the soft humming of machines processing impossible amounts of data. 3,000 ships moved through the dark between stars, each one carrying enough firepower to reduce a planet to cosmic dust. The hegemony had never assembled a fleet this large, not even when they conquered the crystal worlds of Andromeda or crushed the rebel systems near the galactic core. Commander Thale watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Each red dot represented a warship under his command, and together they formed the most devastating military force in known history. The target was laughably simple: a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Intelligence reports suggested the inhabitants had barely mastered spaceflight and possessed no weapons capable of threatening even a single hegemony vessel. The Psychic Division had tried to probe the planet weeks ago, but their reports made little sense. Every attempt to read the minds of the inhabitants resulted in complete static, as if the entire species possessed some form of mental shielding. The analysts dismissed this as primitive technology, perhaps crude psionic dampeners, that would fail the moment real pressure was applied. Thale had conquered 47 worlds in his career. He knew the pattern by heart. First came the overwhelming display of force, then the desperate attempts at negotiation, followed by token resistance that crumbled within hours. The survivors would be integrated into the hegemony, their resources allocated efficiently, their culture preserved in museums. It was a clean process, perfected over centuries of expansion. The blue world called Earth should have been no different. The inhabitants had achieved basic nuclear technology and managed a few stumbling steps into their local star system. Their weapons were chemical explosives and primitive energy beams. Their fastest ships would take months to travel distances the hegemony crossed in minutes. By every measure, they were exactly the kind of developing civilization the hegemony routinely absorbed. Lieutenant Voss approached the command throne with a data tablet in his scaled hands. His species had joined the hegemony 3 centuries ago, grateful for protection after their homeworld faced extinction from solar flares. Like most conquered peoples, they had found purpose serving the greater empire. "Sir, we're receiving standard probe data from the target system," Voss reported. The inhabitants appear to be following normal behavioral patterns. No mass evacuations, no obvious military mobilization. Their orbital installations remain in standard operational status. Thale nodded approvingly. Fear often drove species to irrational acts. Frantic evacuation attempts, desperate military buildups, sometimes even planetary suicide rather than face conquest. The humans seemed to be accepting their fate with unusual calm. Perhaps they were more rational than most primitives. "Any response to our warning broadcasts?" Thale asked. "Negative, sir. We've transmitted standard surrender demands in 17 languages, including mathematical concepts and universal symbols. Their communication networks show normal activity levels, but no official response from any government body." This was also typical. Many species went through a denial phase, refusing to acknowledge the reality of their situation until hegemony ships appeared in their skies. Some governments collapsed entirely, leaving their populations to face conquest without leadership. Others retreated into bunkers and command centers, hoping to wait out what they imagined would be a brief occupation. The main display shifted to show Earth in detail. Continents of green and brown were separated by vast blue oceans. Clouds swirled in beautiful patterns across the surface. City lights sparkled on the night side of the planet like scattered jewels. It looked peaceful, almost inviting. Many worlds appeared lovely from space, even those that harbored the most vicious predators or toxic atmospheres. "Estimated population?" Thale inquired. "Approximately 8 billion sentients distributed across 7 major landmasses. Their largest political entities appear to be something called nation-states, though they've recently established some form of unified military command structure. 8 billion lives." Thala had conquered worlds with larger populations, but something about the number felt significant. Perhaps it was the fact that these humans had achieved so much with such primitive technology. Their cities were vast and complex, their global communication networks sophisticated despite relying on electromagnetic radiation rather than quantum entanglement. The fleet continued its approach, 3,000 ships moving in perfect formation through the void. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, equipped with reality-warping weapons and shields that could deflect the output of entire stars. The flagship alone carried more destructive power than most species possessed in their entire military forces. Thale reviewed the intelligence files one more time. Humans appeared to be remarkably diverse for a single species, with significant variations in appearance, culture, and social organization. They had achieved a rough form of global unity only recently, apparently in response to various existential threats. Their scientific advancement was impressive for their technological level, but still centuries behind even the most basic hegemony capabilities. Most interesting was their apparent lack of psionic ability. The hegemony had encountered non-psychic species before, but usually they developed alternative mental disciplines or technological substitutes. Humans seemed to possess neither, relying entirely on external tools and social cooperation. It was almost primitive, yet they had somehow created a thriving civilization. "Sir, we're approaching the outer system," Lieutenant Voss announced. "Shall I begin standard intimidation protocols?" "Not yet. Let them see us first. Give them time to understand what they're facing." The fleet dropped out of faster than light, travel at the edge of the solar system, their arrival creating massive gravitational disturbances that would be detected by even primitive sensors. 3,000 ships materialized from nowhere, each one larger than the human's biggest space stations. The formation was beautiful and terrible, a geometric pattern of destruction hanging in the darkness like a deadly constellation. On Earth, alarms would be sounding in every military facility. Scientists would be frantically analyzing the sensor data, trying to comprehend the scale of what had just appeared in their sky. Politicians would be demanding explanations that didn't exist. The population would soon learn that their quiet little world had attracted the attention of forces beyond their understanding. Thale allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The conquest would begin soon, and another primitive world would join, the Great Hegemony. It was routine work, but necessary for the expansion of civilization throughout the galaxy. The humans would resist at first, then accept their new reality and find their place in the greater order. He had no way of knowing that he had just made the greatest mistake in the history of galactic warfare. The coffee in Dr. Williams's mug had gone cold hours ago, but he hadn't noticed. His attention was completely focused on the data streaming across multiple monitors in the university's physics lab. The numbers were beautiful in their simplicity, each calculation representing another piece of the puzzle that humanity had been working on for decades. Outside, students walked between buildings as if nothing had changed. They attended classes, studied in the library, and complained about assignment deadlines. None of them knew that 3,000 alien warships had just arrived in their solar system, or that the fate of their entire species might depend on equations scribbled on whiteboards in a basement laboratory. The first detection had come from deep space monitoring stations 12 hours ago. Massive gravitational anomalies appearing instantly at the edge of the solar system, followed by electromagnetic signatures that defied conventional physics. The objects were clearly artificial and obviously hostile, given their formation and approach vector General Brooks had called within minutes of the initial alert. The conversation had been brief and professional, following protocols established years earlier when humanity first realized they might not be alone in the universe. The military would handle the political response, while the scientific community prepared their own contribution to Earth's defense. Dr. Williams checked his watch and sighed. The aliens would probably make their first aggressive move within the next few hours, following what appeared to be standard procedure for this sort of thing. Humanity had encountered 3 previous alien incursions over the past century, each one following a predictable pattern of intimidation, demands, and ultimately violence when Earth failed to surrender immediately. The first encounter had been almost accidental. A single alien scout ship that had stumbled across Earth while conducting what appeared to be a routine survey. The visitor had attempted to establish dominance through displays of superior technology, then departed when humanity's response proved unusual. The second contact had involved a small fleet demanding tribute and resources. The third had been more aggressive, with aliens attempting to establish a military outpost in the asteroid belt. Each time, humanity had provided the same response, and each time the aliens had chosen to leave rather than escalate further. Most humans assumed their visitors had simply decided Earth wasn't worth the trouble. Dr. Williams and his colleagues knew better. His computer chimed softly, indicating another milestone in the calculations. The orbital mechanics were particularly complex this time, given the size of the approaching fleet, but the fundamental principles remained unchanged. Humanity had long ago discovered that the universe was far more cooperative than most species. Realized, provided you asked nicely and understood the proper procedures. A knock at the lab door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Martinez entered carrying a fresh cup of coffee and a tablet displaying the latest satellite imagery. The alien fleet had moved into Earth's orbital space, taking up positions that would allow them to target every major population center simultaneously. "Any word from the military?" Dr. Williams asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Brooks sent the standard warning an hour ago. 30 minutes to alter course or face consequences." The aliens responded with what our linguists describe as contemptuous laughter, transmitted on multiple frequencies. Dr. Williams nodded. This was exactly what they had expected. Every species that had encountered humanity so far had made the same mistake. They assumed that technological superiority automatically translated to military dominance. None of them had bothered to ask why a primitive species would issue warnings to overwhelmingly superior forces. The tablet showed detailed scans of the alien vessels. Each ship was enormous, bristling with weapon systems that could reduce continents to rubble. The fleet's total firepower was probably sufficient to crack Earth's crust and boil away the oceans. By any conventional measure, humanity was facing extinction within the next few hours. "Have they made any attempt to communicate beyond the initial threats?" Dr. Williams asked. "Nothing substantial. Standard demands for surrender, a few scanning attempts that our systems blocked automatically, and some probing attacks on our outer defense satellites. They seem to be following a very predictable conquest protocol." Dr. Williams pulled up another set of calculations on his computer. The aliens had positioned themselves exactly where the models predicted they would, making optimal use of orbital mechanics to maximize their tactical advantage. Their formation was textbook perfect for planetary bombardment, with overlapping fields of fire and redundant targeting systems. Unfortunately for them, they had also positioned themselves exactly where humanity needed them to be. A new alert flashed. On the communications board, the aliens were charging their primary weapons, preparing for what would probably be a demonstration attack designed to terrorize the population into immediate surrender. Intelligence suggested they would target the moon first, providing a clear display of their destructive capabilities while avoiding the complications that would arise from actually damaging Earth's biosphere. Dr. Williams smiled and began entering the final sequence of commands into his system. The calculations had been running for hours, accounting for every variable from gravitational fields to quantum fluctuations. The universe was ready to cooperate, as it always was when approached with proper respect and understanding. The alien fleet fired. A massive energy beam, powerful enough to shatter continents, lanced through space toward the moon's surface. Every sensor on Earth tracked its progress, measuring the tremendous forces involved and calculating the devastating impact that would occur in moments. The beam approached its target, energy readings climbing beyond anything in humanity's databases. For a brief instant, it seemed as though the moon would indeed be destroyed in a spectacular display of alien superiority. Then the beam simply stopped existing. Not deflected, not absorbed, not redirected. It was there one moment, carrying enough energy to destroy a world, and gone the next as if it had never been fired at all. The alien fleet's sensors registered the weapon discharge, confirmed energy expenditure, but detected no impact anywhere in the solar system. Dr. Williams watched the readings with satisfaction. The quantum mechanics involved were incredibly complex, but the basic principle was simple enough. Matter and energy were just different forms of information, and information could be edited if you knew the right commands and had permission from the underlying system. Humanity had spent decades learning to ask the universe very politely if it would mind helping with various problems. The universe, it turned out, was remarkably accommodating once you approached it with proper respect. His phone buzzed with a message from General Brooks. The military was ready to proceed with the next phase of the response. Dr. Williams finished his coffee, straightened his tie, and walked to the small recording studio they had set up in the adjacent room. It was time to have a conversation with their visitors. Panic swept through the hegemony fleet like wildfire spreading across dry grass. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. Weapons simply did not fail in such a complete and inexplicable manner. Energy. Beams did not vanish into nothingness after being fired successfully. Commander Thales stared at his tactical display, trying to make sense of readings that defied every law of physics he understood. His flagship's most advanced sensors confirmed that the planet cracker beam had been fired with full power. Energy had been expended. The weapon systems showed normal discharge patterns, and targeting computers had locked on to the intended target with perfect accuracy. Yet the moon remained completely undamaged, floating serenely in Earth's sky as if nothing had happened. "Run a full diagnostic on all weapon systems," Thale ordered, his voice carefully controlled despite the growing unease in his chest. "Check for sabotage, system failures, or any form of external interference." "Lieutenant," Voss worked frantically at his station, pulling up data streams from across the fleet. "Sir, all systems show green across all ships. No malfunctions detected, no signs of tampering or external influence. According to every measurement we have, the weapon fired successfully and should have impacted the target." Thale had seen defensive technologies before. Energy shields, reality anchors, temporal displacement fields. The galaxy was full of civilizations that had developed various ways to protect themselves from attack. But this was different. The humans hadn't deflected or absorbed his attack. They had somehow convinced the universe that it had never happened at all. A communication request flashed on his screen. One of the destroyer captains was requesting permission to speak directly with Fleet Command. Thale accepted the transmission, and Captain Drex's worried face appeared on the display. "Commander, we're detecting some form of spatial distortion around our ships. Nothing threatening, but our navigation systems are reporting anomalous readings. It's as if local space-time is becoming more dense." More ships reported similar phenomena. Subtle changes in gravitational fields, minor fluctuations in quantum foam, tiny alterations in the fundamental constants that governed reality in their immediate vicinity. None of it made sense according to standard physics, but the measurements were consistent across the entire fleet. Then the first ship disappeared. The destroyer, Swift Vengeance, was there one moment, its captain in the middle of reporting normal status, and simply gone the next. Not destroyed by weapons fire, not torn apart by explosions, not consumed by any visible force. It ceased to exist as completely as if it had never been built in the first place. The fleet's communication channels, erupted in confused chatter as captains tried to understand what they had witnessed. Sensor records showed the ship had been present, then absent, with no transition period between the two states. Even more disturbing, the crew manifests and construction records still existed, but the physical vessel had been edited out of reality. Thale felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare, genuine fear. All ships assume defensive positions and prepare for immediate retreat. Something is very wrong here. But when his navigation officer tried to plot a course away from Earth, the computers returned error messages. The ships could maneuver normally within the solar system, but any attempt to engage faster-than-light drives or leave the area resulted in system failures. They were trapped, held in place by forces they couldn't detect or understand. A second destroyer vanished, then a third. The pattern was methodical and deliberate, starting with the smallest vessels and working systematically toward larger ones. Whatever was removing the ships was giving the aliens time to understand what was happening to them, like a teacher demonstrating a lesson to particularly slow students. Commander Thale had fought against energy beings, mechanical swarms, and hive-minded collectives. He had faced weapons that could destroy stars and defenses that could survive the heat death of galaxies. None of it had prepared him for an enemy that could simply decide his ships didn't exist and make the universe agree with that assessment. "Sir, incoming transmission from the planet's surface," his communication officer reported. The main display shifted to show a middle-aged human sitting in what appeared to be an ordinary office. Books lined the walls behind him, and a coffee mug sat on his desk next to stacks of papers. He looked like an academic or researcher, completely calm despite the orbital battle happening above his world. "Good afternoon," the human said pleasantly. "I'm Dr. Williams from Earth University. I wanted to have a quick chat before things get too far out of hand." Thale found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "What are you doing to my ships?" "Oh, we're not doing anything to them," Dr. Williams replied, sipping from his coffee mug. "We're simply asking reality to be a bit more selective about what exists in our local area. The universe has been very cooperative so far." Another ship disappeared, while the human spoke. A heavy cruiser that had survived battles across 12 star systems. One moment it was there, weapons charging, crew at battle stations. The next moment, empty space. "This is impossible," Thale said. "Matter cannot simply cease to exist. Energy cannot be destroyed without trace. You're violating fundamental laws of physics." Dr. Williams smiled gently. "That's a common misconception. The laws of physics aren't really laws at all. They're more like guidelines, very polite suggestions about how things usually work. But if you ask nicely and provide proper documentation, the universe is quite willing to make exceptions." The systematic erasure continued. Frigates, destroyers, cruisers, and battleships vanished in orderly sequence. Each disappearance was clean and complete, leaving no debris or energy signatures. The crews didn't have time to scream or send final messages. They were simply there, then not there, as if they had never existed at all. Thale's fleet, once the most powerful military force in the galaxy, was being methodically deleted from reality by what appeared to be polite requests to the underlying structure of existence itself. His sensors detected no weapons, no energy sources, no technological apparatus that could account for what was happening. The attack seemed to originate from space itself, as if the vacuum had developed opinions about which objects deserved to exist. "Why are you doing this?" Thale asked, watching his ship count drop below 2,000. "You were warned," Dr. Williams replied reasonably. "We gave you 30 minutes to change course. You chose to ignore that warning and proceeded with hostile intent. Now you're being used as a demonstration for the next group that decides to threaten our planet." A terrible understanding began to dawn on Commander Thale. This wasn't a battle or even a defensive action. It was a teaching moment, designed to educate future aggressors about the inadvisability of threatening Earth. His entire fleet, the pride of the hegemony military, was being used as a lesson plan. "Please," he said, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. My crews have families. They're following orders, serving their empire. They don't deserve this. Dr. Williams nodded sympathetically. I understand your position, Commander. Unfortunately, your empire has a habit of conquering other worlds and forcing their populations to serve against their will. We've decided that pattern needs to change. The ship count dropped below 1,000, then 500, then 100. Each disappearance was clean, efficient, and absolutely final. The most advanced military technology in the galaxy was being casually discarded by beings who treated the fundamental forces of reality like cooperative colleagues. Commander Thale, veteran of 47 successful conquests, watched his career end in the most humiliating defeat in recorded history. His mighty fleet was being erased by primitives who had somehow learned to file complaints with the universe itself. The president of Earth's unified government had been having a perfectly ordinary Tuesday until the aliens arrived. Her morning had been filled with budget meetings, environmental reports, and the usual diplomatic complications that arose when trying to coordinate policy across dozens of nation-states. She had been reviewing agricultural statistics when General Brooks called to inform her that 3,000 hostile spaceships had just appeared in Earth's backyard. President Davis walked through the White House gardens, enjoying the afternoon sunshine while her security detail maintained a discreet distance. The rose bushes were blooming beautifully this year, and she made a mental note to compliment the groundskeeping staff. It seemed important to appreciate small pleasures, especially on days when the fate of human civilization hung in the balance. Her tablet chimed softly with an update from the Defense Command. The alien fleet had been reduced to fewer than 200 ships, and Dr. Williams was ready for the next phase of their response. She reviewed the prepared statement one final time, made a few minor edits, and walked to the recording studio that had been hastily set up in the East Wing. The studio was simple and professional, designed to project calm authority rather than military aggression. A single camera faced a comfortable chair positioned in front of bookshelves filled with classic literature and historical documents. The setup was meant to suggest scholarly discussion rather than wartime propaganda. President Davis settled into the chair and nodded to the technician. The recording began immediately, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach every remaining alien ship simultaneously. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice warm and conversational. "I'm President Davis representing the people of Earth. I hope you're having a pleasant visit to our solar system despite the unfortunate circumstances." She paused to take a sip of water, allowing her words to sink in. The aliens were probably expecting threats, demands, or desperate attempts at negotiation. Instead, they were receiving what sounded like a welcoming address from a tourist bureau. "I know you're wondering how we're managing to make your ships disappear," she continued. "The answer is actually quite simple, though it might take some explanation for those unfamiliar with our particular approach to problem solving." The president gestured to a whiteboard that had been wheeled into camera range. Complex equations covered its surface, along with diagrams that looked like a cross between quantum mechanics and abstract art. Most viewers would find the symbols incomprehensible, but the underlying message was clear. This wasn't random destruction, but the application of sophisticated scientific principles. About 200 years ago, our scientists made a remarkable discovery. They found that the universe isn't really a fixed system with unchangeable laws, but more like a very large and very cooperative computer program. The laws of physics are basically the default settings, but they can be modified if you know the right commands and have proper authorization. She smiled pleasantly, as if discussing the weather rather than reality manipulation. "It took us quite a while to learn the proper protocols. The universe is very polite, but it has strict requirements about documentation and permissions. You can't just demand changes. You have to ask nicely and provide compelling reasons for any alterations to local reality." On her tablet, she could see real-time updates from the orbital situation. The alien fleet was down to fewer than 100 ships now, and their communications channels were flooded with panic and confusion. Several captains were trying to surrender, but the systematic erasure continued according to predetermined parameters. The breakthrough came when we realized that consciousness and quantum mechanics are more closely related than anyone had suspected. Observation doesn't just affect quantum states, it actively participates in defining reality. When enough conscious minds agree on something and present their case properly, the universe tends to accommodate their requests. President Davis stood and walked to a window overlooking the garden. The camera followed her movement, maintaining focus on her calm demeanor, while the familiar sights of Earth provided a peaceful backdrop. We've spent decades learning to work with reality rather than against it. Other species develop bigger weapons and stronger shields, but we decided to take a different approach. We asked the universe if it would mind helping us protect our planet from hostile visitors, and it very graciously agreed. The alien ship count dropped below 50. Commander Thale's increasingly desperate communications were being monitored by Earth's intelligence services, providing valuable insights into hegemony military doctrine and psychology. The surviving crews were beginning to understand that they weren't facing superior technology, but something far more fundamental. You're probably thinking this sounds impossible, President Davis continued. Most species assume that physical laws are absolute and unchangeable. But consider this. If consciousness can affect quantum states, and quantum states determine the behavior of matter and energy, then consciousness can influence reality at the most basic level. The only real question is how to do it properly. She returned to her chair and opened a leather-bound notebook. The pages were filled with handwritten notes in multiple languages, mathematical formulas interspersed with what looked like philosophical observations. The secret is respect. The universe is incredibly vast and complex, but it's also remarkably reasonable. If you approach it with proper courtesy, explain your situation clearly, and make reasonable requests, it's usually happy to help. The key is understanding that you're not demanding changes. You're participating in a collaborative process. Another update flashed on her tablet. The alien fleet was down to 27 ships, and several captains were attempting to broadcast surrender messages. The systematic demonstration would continue until only a few vessels remained, ensuring that survivors would carry a complete understanding of what they had witnessed. This is why we issued a warning when your fleet arrived, President Davis explained. We wanted to give you the opportunity to leave peacefully. When you chose to ignore that warning and proceed with hostile intent, you essentially volunteered to participate in an educational demonstration. She closed the notebook and folded her hands in her lap. Her expression remained pleasant and professional, as if she were concluding a routine press briefing rather than explaining the systematic destruction of the most powerful military force in galactic history. We don't enjoy doing this, but we've found it's the most effective way to communicate with aggressive species. Words alone rarely convince militaristic civilizations to change their behavior, but practical demonstrations tend to be quite memorable. The final phase of the operation was beginning. Only 12 alien ships remained, including Commander Thale's flagship. The survivors would be allowed to witness the complete destruction of their fleet before being permitted to leave. They would carry the story back to their empire, ensuring that future expansion plans would carefully avoid the small blue world that had learned to make polite requests of reality itself. We hope this experience has been educational, President Davis concluded. Earth will always welcome peaceful visitors, but we've grown rather tired of attempted invasions. The universe has been very patient with us as we've learned to work together, and we've found it's quite protective of species that show proper respect for the fundamental forces of existence. The recording ended, and President Davis returned to her afternoon schedule. There were trade agreements to review, infrastructure projects to approve, and a dozen other matters requiring her attention. The fact that humanity had just demonstrated the ability to casually delete hostile fleets from reality was simply another item on a very busy agenda. The faculty lounge at Earth University looked exactly like what it was. A comfortable space where professors gathered to drink coffee, grade papers, and engage in the sort of academic discussions that could last for hours without reaching any definitive conclusions. Mismatched furniture clustered around low tables, bookshelves lined the walls, and the coffee maker in the corner had seen better decades. Commander Thale sat in an oversized armchair that had probably been donated by someone's grandmother, trying to reconcile his surroundings with the fact that these same people had just casually erased the most powerful military fleet in galactic history. Dr. Williams sat across from him, still wearing the same rumpled sweater and faded jeans he had worn during their orbital conversation. The invitation had arrived 30 minutes after the last of Thale's escort ships disappeared, leaving only his flagship hanging alone in Earth's orbit. A simple message, suggesting that he might like to come down for coffee and conversation, transmitted with coordinates for a landing site on the university campus. Against every protocol he had ever learned, Thale had accepted. His shuttle had landed in a parking lot between what appeared to be a physics building and a student dormitory. College students had walked past without giving the alien craft more than curious glances, as if extraterrestrial visitors were a common occurrence. Several had actually waved at him as he disembarked, which was possibly the most surreal moment in a day full of impossible experiences. "More coffee?" Dr. Williams asked, gesturing toward the pot on the side table. Thale nodded, still struggling to process the casual nature of the interaction. The liquid was bitter and caffeinated, nothing like the refined beverages served aboard hegemony vessels, but somehow appropriate for the circumstances. He was sharing coffee with the beings who had just demonstrated the ability to convince reality itself to cooperate with their desires. "I need to understand," Thale said finally. "How long have you been able to do this?" Dr. Williams considered the question while stirring sugar into his cup. "The theoretical framework has been developing for about 2 centuries, but practical applications only became possible in the last 50 years or so. It's surprisingly difficult to get the universe's attention, and even harder to maintain a coherent conversation with something that vast and complex." A woman in her 60s entered the lounge and helped herself to coffee. She nodded politely to both men before settling into a nearby chair with a stack of student papers. Thale recognized her from intelligence files. Dr. Chen, one of Earth's leading theoretical physicists, and apparently someone comfortable enough with the situation to grade assignments, while an alien commander processed the destruction of his entire fleet. "The hardest part was learning proper etiquette," Dr. Williams continued. "The universe is incredibly polite, but it has very specific ideas about appropriate behavior. You can't just demand changes to physical laws. You have to present your case respectfully and provide compelling justification for any alterations." Thale thought about the 3,000 ships that had vanished without trace. "What justification did you provide for destroying my fleet?" "We didn't destroy anything," Dr. Williams corrected gently. "We simply asked the universe to be more selective about what kinds of objects should exist in our local area. Specifically, we requested that hostile military vessels might be better suited to existing somewhere else, or perhaps not at all." The casual tone was almost more disturbing than the demonstration itself. These humans spoke about reality manipulation the way other species discussed weather patterns or agricultural yields. They had turned universe-altering power into routine academic procedure. President Davis entered the lounge, followed by a man in military uniform who Thale recognized as General Brooks. Both helped themselves to coffee and joined the informal gathering, transforming what should have been a high-level diplomatic meeting into something resembling a faculty coffee break. "I hope the tour of campus was interesting," President Davis said, settling into a chair that had clearly been claimed by generations of professors. "Our students were quite excited to meet their first extraterrestrial visitor." They seemed remarkably calm about the situation, Thale observed. "Oh, They know about our special relationship with reality, Dr. Chen said, looking up from her papers. It's part of the standard physics curriculum now. Most of them are more interested in whether you'd be willing to give a guest lecture about interstellar travel. Thale stared at her. These people had developed the power to rewrite the fundamental laws of existence, and they were using it as teaching material for undergraduate students. The implications were staggering. "We should probably discuss your options," General Brooks said, his tone professional but not unfriendly. "You're welcome to return to your empire and report what happened here. We're hoping that word will spread and reduce the number of aggressive visitors we receive. Alternatively," President Davis added, "you could stay on Earth for a while. We've had several previous visitors choose that option. There's quite a lot to learn about our approach to cosmic citizenship, and we're always happy to share knowledge with interested colleagues." Thale considered his choices. Returning to the hegemony would mean delivering news that would fundamentally alter their understanding of the galaxy's power balance. A primitive species had demonstrated capabilities that made the Empire's greatest achievements look like children's toys. The political and military implications would be enormous. "If I return, what guarantee do I have that your people won't expand beyond this system?" he asked. Dr. Williams laughed, a sound completely free of malice. "Commander, we can barely manage to govern our own planet effectively. The last thing we want is responsibility for other worlds. We're quite happy here, thank you." "But surely you realize the power you possess," Thale pressed. "You could demand tribute from every civilization in the galaxy. You could reshape entire star systems according to your desires." "To what end?" President Davis asked. "We have everything we need right here. Our planet is beautiful, our people are generally content, and we've built a reasonably functional society. Why would we want to complicate that by conquering other worlds?" The concept was so alien to hegemony thinking that Thale struggled to process it. Every species his empire had encountered either sought to expand their territory or was forced to do so by external pressures. The idea of voluntary isolation, despite possessing overwhelming power, was virtually incomprehensible. "Besides," Dr. Chen added, "the universe seems to prefer that we stay local. We've discussed expansion possibilities, but the feedback we get suggests that our current arrangement works well for everyone involved. Reality appears to appreciate having a stable, peaceful species to work with." A student knocked on the lounge door and entered with a question about quantum mechanics homework. Dr. Williams spent several minutes explaining wave function collapse, while Commander Thale, former leader of the greatest military fleet in Galactic history, sat drinking coffee and listening to an undergraduate physics lesson. The surreal nature of the moment was not lost on him. Hours ago, he had commanded weapons capable of destroying stars. Now he was observing a routine academic interaction in a university coffee room, surrounded by the beings who had casually deleted his entire fleet from existence. The universe really is quite reasonable once you learn to communicate properly, Dr. Williams concluded, both to the student and to Thale. The key is understanding that you're part of a collaborative process rather than trying to impose your will on an unwilling system. The student thanked him and left, probably unaware that she had just received a physics explanation in the presence of an alien military commander whose worldview was being systematically dismantled by polite conversation and caffeine. "So what will it be, Commander?" General Brooks asked. "Return to your empire with our message, or stay and learn more about our approach to cosmic relations?" Thale thought about his surviving crew, waiting aboard his flagship in orbit. They would expect him to return with orders for revenge, or at least some plan for salvaging their mission. Instead, he was being offered a choice between delivering news that would terrify the hegemony leadership or abandoning his career to study with the species that had humiliated them. "If I stay, what would happen to my crew?" "They're welcome to join you," President Davis replied. "We have several former military personnel from other species working with our research teams. They provide valuable perspectives on interstellar politics, and alternative approaches to problem solving. And if we choose to leave? Then you'll be provided with complete documentation of today's events, along with our standard information package for visiting civilizations, Dr. Chen said, setting aside her grading. We find that thorough documentation reduces the likelihood of future misunderstandings. The information package, Thale suspected, would be more terrifying than any military threat the hegemony had ever faced. Detailed proof that a single world possessed the ability to rewrite reality itself would fundamentally alter the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Every expansion plan, every military doctrine, every assumption about technological superiority would become obsolete overnight. There is one other consideration, Dr. Williams added thoughtfully. We've been wondering about the long-term stability of aggressive expansion empires. The universe seems to prefer more sustainable approaches to civilization development. The implication was clear. Humanity's relationship with reality wasn't just a defensive capability. It was part of a broader philosophy about how intelligent species should interact with the cosmos. The hegemony's conquest-based model might not be compatible with whatever cosmic citizenship entailed. "Are you threatening my empire?" Thale asked. "Not at all," President Davis assured him. "We are simply noting that the universe appears to have opinions about how civilizations should behave. We've learned to work within those preferences rather than against them." Thale finished his coffee and stood, walking to the window that overlooked the university campus. Students moved between buildings, carrying backpacks and talking animatedly about classes and social plans. Faculty members walked more slowly, often engaged in intense discussions that probably involved concepts that could reshape reality itself. It was a peaceful scene, utterly ordinary, except for the knowledge that these people had learned to file formal requests with the fundamental forces of existence. They had turned cosmic power into academic routine, treating universe-altering capabilities as just another tool for maintaining the quiet life they had built on their small blue world. "I need to contact my crew," Thale said finally. "They deserve to know their options before I make any decisions." "Of course," Dr. Williams replied. "Feel free to use our communication facilities. We'll be here when you're ready to continue the conversation." Thale walked toward the door, then paused. "One last question. How many other species know about your capabilities?" "Word is spreading gradually," President Davis admitted. "We've had 47 different civilizations attempt to invade or intimidate us over the past century. Most of the survivors have shared their experiences, though the reports are often dismissed as impossible by their home governments." "Until now," Thale said. "Until now," she agreed. "Your fleet was large enough and well-documented enough that the evidence will be harder to ignore." Commander Thale left the faculty lounge and walked across the campus toward the communication building, his mind racing with possibilities and implications. Behind him, the humans returned to their coffee and their papers, having delivered another lesson in the inadvisability of threatening Earth. In orbit above, his flagship waited with the remnants of his crew, sole survivors of the most devastating military defeat in recorded history. Soon they would have to choose between returning to deliver impossible news or staying to learn from the species that had somehow convinced the universe to take their side in any conflict. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had filed a formal complaint with reality itself about aggressive neighbors, and reality had responded by updating its policies regarding hostile visitors to Earth. The small blue world that had seemed so vulnerable was now quietly added to a very exclusive list of places in the universe marked with a simple designation, "Do Not Disturb."